This is the best camera phone. This is the best camera phone. This is the best camera phone. This is the best camera phone ever. Hey guys, you're watching Tech Edit. My name is Basil and this is the OPPO Find X8 Ultra. Now, once upon a time, you could make a bold statement like, this is the best camera phone ever, and it would stick, but now things are more nuanced. It's not really about which is the best camera phone, it's about which is the best camera phone for you, because they're all so good. Hopefully by the end of this video, you'll know whether this phone is. The OPPO Find X8 Ultra, I've spent 3 months with it alongside the best from Xiaomi, Vivo, Samsung, etc. Before I dive into this phone though and my impressions, if you're not already subscribed to Tech Edit, please do. It's how you stay on top of everything that I do. And a quick disclaimer, I have worked with OPPO in a consulting capacity. However, this video is not sponsored. Starting with price and availability, and you can import the Find X8 Ultra from China. It's not available in the West. However, there are benefits to importing your phone. It costs 8,500 Hong Kong dollars to import it from Trinity Electronics, which is a supplier I use all the time, and I really rate their service. That's around £850, $1,100 for a phone that could be best flagship camera of 2025. That's a really good price. Obviously, there are software implications, and I'll come on to those later. As for the design, it's kind of smartphone by numbers, but in a good way. It's got flat sides, flat front, curved corners, and it's very minimalistic. In graphic design theory, there's a well-known analogy, the crystal goblet, and it puts forward the case that good design shouldn't actually really stand out. It shouldn't detract from what it's trying to do. In the case of the original theory, it refers to typography, so good typography shouldn't be distracting. And I feel like OPPO's applied that design philosophy to the Find X8 Ultra because its design is very not distracting, but it kind of also does everything pretty much right. It really is kind of like the total opposite to the Nothing Phone 3, for example. There are quite a few buttons on here. On the right-hand side, you've got volume and power buttons, and there's a touch-sensitive, which also pressure-sensitive camera key. On the left-hand side, there's an AI button, which you can deactivate in the settings because the feature is only available in Chinese. And you can set it to OnePlus alert slider style, ring, vibrate, notifications on. The USB-C port and SIM slot are at the base, and there is also a loudspeaker. This doesn't have an eSIM, being a Chinese phone, so that is one compromise. However, it does have a dual SIM slot. There's also an in-display fingerprint scanner, and that's really responsive, and the camera bumper around the back is really slimline compared to the Vivo X200 Ultra, even if it is more pronounced than the S25 Ultra. I feel like it's just a very balanced phone. It's comfortable to hold, largely owing to the rounded corners, which nuzzle nicely into a palm. It's heavy, 226 grams, so do bear that in mind. And while on paper it's very thin, actually when you get it in the flesh, because of the flat sides, it's not tapered in at the edges. It doesn't feel quite as slimline as the specs may suggest compared to other more curved edged phones. You can pick it up in this white version I've got, black or blush pink, whichever you go for. It's IP68 and IP69 water resistant, so it can handle splashes and sprays at high temperatures. There's also a pre-fitted screen protector and a case in the box, but it is one of those soft plastic cases, so if you want a more premium one, you'll have to pick that up separately. Onto the display, and I really have no notes. It's a flat screen, which a lot of you guys love. 6.82 inches gives you plenty of space, also 120 Hz, very smooth, gets very bright. 10-bit HDR content looks fantastic on here. QHD plus resolution also means clarity is on point. I do wish OPPO improved the speakers slightly. They aren't bad, but they definitely aren't best in class. They produce a sound that's a little bit less easy to listen to for long periods than the iPhone 16 Pro Max or indeed the Xperia 1 Mark 7. Now onto the camera, and this is probably the section a lot of you have been tuning in for, especially considering not many people have covered the recently dropped log video. So if you're into that, the video section will come. But I'm going to start with the hardware. It's a 5-camera system. 4 take photos, 1 is a true chroma camera that improves color accuracy, and it does that by segmenting a scene and identifying the kind of color balance for each part. And OPPO says it's better tuned to handle things like neon lights, etc. So that's cool. But the primary camera is a light 900 1-inch sensor with a 23mm really wide camera. As for the ultra wide, it's a 1/2.76-inch Samsung JN5 sensor with PDAF. It's 15mm, so gives you a really expansive field of view, but you can also macro focus nice and close or focus into the distance. There are two telephoto cameras on this phone. The first is a 3x camera that has a 1/1.56-inch Sony Light 700 sensor. That's got an f2.1 aperture, 70mm equivalent focal length, and OIS. And there's a 6x camera, 135mm equivalent focal length. It's a Sony Light 600 sensor, which is 1/1.95 inches optical image stabilization as well. A couple of standout points. The 3x camera can capture macro photography because it's a floating telephoto lens, so as near as 10 centimeters from a subject. Also, the 1-inch primary camera sensor really is as big as it gets from a smartphone. Selfie fans can also expect a 32 megapixel front camera, and that's a Sony Light 506 sensor, 1/2.74 inches, matched with an f2.4 aperture and a 21mm nice and wide equivalent focal length. Before talking about photo quality, I am going to talk about the camera button. It's on the right side of the phone, and when in landscape, it feels quite natural to press it to take your shot or to swipe to zoom. Now, I disabled it because I found when I was shooting in portrait, I was accidentally squeezing the phone taking my shot. The zoom only works in landscape, which is great because that means you're not zooming when you're holding it in portrait. But still, I disabled it for in-camera features, but I kept it active as a shortcut to my camera. So I would double tap it when I was in any other app and it would launch my camera, just like double pressing a power button on a lot of other phones. So that's the camera button, not as customizable as Vivo's or Apple's, but customizable enough to make it work. So the camera mix is super versatile and gives you a lot of range, which is great. It doesn't cover you in the same way as Vivo does throughout that range with the X200 Ultra. That, for example, puts a 35mm more in the middle, so you get a little bit more coverage in the middle, but because of the 50 megapixel resolution sensors, in-sensor cropping, and that large primary camera sensor, the Find X8 Ultra still does a solid job of making this feel like a very complete system. In fact, it feels like such a complete system. It sort of feels like 3 cameras: an automatic camera, a portrait camera, and a more pro enthusiast camera. Starting with the automatic camera, and it has a tendency to really help you out. Well, if you saw my Sony Xperia 1 Mark 7 review, I complained that that kind of makes you do a lot of work to get your picture. The Find X8 Ultra leans into kind of helping you pull out detail from shadows and highlights as well, while simultaneously creating a picture that looks pleasing, but it doesn't look overly AI-ified and processed by comparison to a lot of the competitors, at least not until you zoom, which I'll come on to in a bit. It does expose up, meaning it generally produces brighter images, and for some that'll mean brighter, more pleasing images with more shadow detail, etc. But for others, the pictures can look a little bit too bright. It also captures photos with slightly more pared back contrast than Xiaomi, Vivo, etc., and Apple and Samsung, of course, and that makes the photos from automatic mode more editable, which I quite like actually, but there is less over sharpening, again, which is technically good, but some people might want a more social media ready post straight out of the camera. That's not to say you can't get a stunning shot from this phone, but it is to say that you can really tune it to be exactly how you want it to look. Colors are typically naturally rendered. It leans towards warmer hues, which I quite like. And as I've alluded to, dynamic range is excellent. Shots look rich without detail being really zealously HDR-ified, if that makes sense. I also found it to be relatively consistent across the cameras for photos, which is good. And as far as the zoom goes, it's really, really impressive. Having that optical 6x in there helped out a lot. I took it to a concert and it was one of the top performers, and in general day-to-day use, even in low light, the zoom tends to render quite low noise results and competes with the best out there, outperforming the Vivo X200 Ultra in certain cases falling behind in others. But when you do zoom in at extreme ranges, it will redraw elements. That's when the AI kicks in. So while other phones employ AI quite a lot throughout the processing, OPPO really starts to do it when you zoom. The ultra-wide camera can produce some really nice looking shots, not too much distortion, and OPPO's Hypertone image engine creates this kind of unified look for photography, at least across all the cameras. It's not going to compete on quality with the Vivo X200 Ultra. It just doesn't have that image sensor size, but you notice that more in video than you do for photos. Macro photography carries forward the theme of the OPPO Find X8 Ultra not overdoing it. You can capture with the ultra-wide, like I said, or with that 3x, and I use the 3x 9 times out of 10. Just creates that distance, no shadow casting, and also the perspective is more natural looking, less distortion. And the photos from that 3x in bright environments, but also in middling environments as well, have plenty of detail, but not over sharpened detail. So macro shots from this are very ready for an edit. And again, like with photos across scenes, it works well in low light environments, especially if you have a steady hand, but it's pretty forgiving. So I mentioned this phone felt like 3 cameras, and I've covered the automatic camera side of things, but now let's talk about portrait mode, because it really is standalone worth giving a shout out to. It's able to capture warm, natural looking portraits that still look flattering. The depth separation is exceptional. It's able to identify single strands of hair, and whether it's AI or not, it looks incredibly natural. Also, when you take your shot after the beat, jump into the settings, dial back that blur to look as authentic as possible. The blur in the Hasselblad portrait mode is tuned to replicate that of Hasselblad lenses. Super versatile as well. So 1x, tap 1x again, go from 23 to 35, tap 2x, jump through to 47, tap 3x all the way through to 70, tap it again 85, and through 6x 135 millimeters, back to 1x, 2x, 3x, etc. So while some other smartphones lock you in with that portrait mode, make you zoom, even if it's a digital zoom, pixels I'm looking at you, on the OPPO Find X8 Ultra, you've got a combination of optical and digital to get the best results. What's also impressive is even at night, it's able to capture a good portrait with accurate depth separation. So that's very seldom seen on a smartphone. Now onto the final camera I was talking about, and that's master mode. Now I really like this mode, even when I'm not changing the pro settings like shutter speed, etc., which you can do, but master mode has a completely different vibe, even in its JPEGs that it captured. You can capture raw, max, but the JPEGs have a depth to them, a kind of traditional photographic look. It's based on the Hasselblad X2D camera, the look, and that really does come across. So you have shots that look more dramatic and that generally, again, like I said, just have a more photographic look. There isn't the dynamic range that you get from automatic mode, but traditional photographers will probably really like leaning into that. And then obviously you can also capture the RAWs to play about with. As for the selfie camera, you can see this is being recorded on it. In overcast environments, you can see it's raining outside. I'm in front of a big old window in a hotel room. It does a good job. In bright environments, it can wash out your face a little bit and captures with a very flat color profile, which is interesting. In darker environments, it'll use the screen to brighten things up. For photos, videos don't fare quite so fantastically, but it's still a really solid selfie camera. But thanks to the 23mm really wide primary camera, it's actually a pretty safe bet to turn this thing around and shoot on the main camera. You get superior stabilization and obviously a superior image. So I'm going to give you a quick sample of what selfie footage looks like shot on the rear camera. I haven't got a preview, but I'm just going to use my judgment to guess I'm in frame. So this is being shot on the main camera on the OPPO Find X8 Ultra, and as you can hopefully see, the 1-inch sensor pulls out a really pleasant amount of background blur, and also detail on my face should be sharp. Hopefully my eyes should be at the sharpest point. But yeah, really like using this for vlogging, even if it doesn't have like a screen around the back or anything that's really fit for purpose. Video is one area the Find X8 Ultra really shines for a few reasons. You've got 4K 60 across all cameras at up to 10-bit
Dolby Vision. HDR recording looks very good, and footage, especially from that main camera, looks very well stabilized, almost gimbal-esque in its smoothness. If you're taking heavy footsteps, you're running or something, obviously that's going to challenge it a bit too much. This isn't trying to be an action camera, but for a handheld camera, for panning shots, etc., it's very, very impressive. In bright environments, it's good at keeping highlights in check while simultaneously boosting shadow detail, and in dark scenes, the 1-inch sensor really shines. When you start to zoom in or zoom out from that camera, especially in darker scenes, you really notice the video difference, and so then it stops feeling like a system. So you're better off in darker environments, and as I'll come on to in log video, choosing a camera and sticking to it, but bright environments across all 4 videos handled very well. So the recently updated log feature for the Find X8 Ultra has been a long time coming, and it's really nice to see that OPPO's coupled it with its own LUT. So Rec 709 and Rec 2020 LUTs specifically for its take on log. I've got a few samples that I'm playing now, and you can see what it looks like. It's a different kind of log to the Vivo. It runs a little bit warmer and a little bit flatter, and I'm okay with that. It's very, very editable. And again, the stabilization and the low light performance from the primary camera really shine here. There perhaps isn't as much croppability in the 4K log footage from here, especially from the ultra wide, as from the Vivo. So if you do like switching up the cameras, the Vivo may edge ahead. But again, as with video in general, if you stick with the primary camera, you are golden. If you can keep the phone super still, another highlight is video at 6x to 10x. Even when recording log, it looks really good and editable, and it handles noise pretty well. Now, it wouldn't be an accurate representation of the experience if I don't talk about Premiere Pro. That's the software tool I use to edit this video, all my videos. I'm sucked into the Adobe ecosystem. I used to be a graphic designer. With that in mind, OPPO and Vivo footage play terribly with Premiere Pro. If you drop clips straight in, they judder. You can try locking in the frame rate on the phone in Premiere Pro, re-encode them through Adobe Media Encoder. Nothing worked. I have to process out every single clip that you're seeing in this video shot on this phone through DaVinci Resolve, and only then will it work in Premiere Pro. I'm not sure where the issue is, and it's a real bugbear because they are 2 of my favorite camera phones when it comes to video especially, and with the new log video across both, I would love to just use these phones, but they cripple my workflow to the point where I actually can't right now. That issue aside though, it goes without saying I am super impressed with the Find X8 Ultra, and I'm also surprisingly impressed with the experience when it comes to software, despite the fact this is a Chinese phone. Running Android 15 and ColorOS 15, which is OPPO's interface on top of Android, the whole experience is really smooth. You do have to go through a process of de-China-ifying the phone, and that entails making the language English, uninstalling the preloaded applications, and then making the Google Play Store and all of that activated by installing the application, and then getting all of your favorite Google apps, Google Keyboard, everything on here. OPPO does make it harder than Vivo to get a real kind of Western-ish experience on its Chinese phones. On the Plus, it has updated Android Auto support for the Find X8 Ultra, which is fantastic. Vivo's done that as well. But I feel like it could go a little bit further to make importer kind of communities really have an easy ride of getting this phone working right for them. For example, you can't install the Google Dialer and Google Messages applications and just get them working. You have to go through a bunch of permissions, they reset themselves. I honestly just gave up and I use the pre-installed ones, even though there's a little bit of Chinese in there, and I'm a techie, so I think if they went the Vivo route, which lets you just swap the apps out, it would be really, really beneficial. And also from a PR point of view, after all, they send these devices to Western media to review. So it makes sense that they just make it an easy process without having to go overboard and anglicize the whole thing. It's also worth noting, in addition to being smooth, ColorOS is pretty darn clever. There are quite a few AI tools. Now, with a lot of imported phones, you'd expect there to not be any language tools supported, and I did mention the AI brain kind of thing that this button on the left side automatically fires up is locked to Chinese, and that isn't accessible. But you can still record notes and stuff like that, voice notes, and it'll transcribe them in English. There are a number of English tools supported, and more importantly, the imaging tools, the AI imaging tools are working just fine, and they're very good. So that's AI object removal, sharpening, and you can remove reflections as well. And I've had really good experiences with them. There's also more basic, not AI editing tools, so you can customize the look of your photo if you don't fancy installing Lightroom. But I would install Lightroom because it works beautifully with the RAWs you can capture on this phone. Of course, you can't natively install Gemini, combine it with a long press of the power button for quick access to your voice assistant, but you can install the app and it works just fine. Obviously, all the other AI apps, but Gemini is probably one that I've been asked the most about because people want to know if you can make it the default voice assistant. I haven't managed to. If you have, please let people know in the comments. But one thing that sets the OPPO Find X8 Ultra and OPPO and OnePlus devices in general apart from the crowd, and is an absolute game changer for me, is the macOS connectivity. Yes, the iPhone connectivity is handy. That's O+ Connect to wirelessly transfer files to your iPhone. But the Mac connectivity means that it's easy to get files, big videos via Wi-Fi direct from your phone to your Mac. And that's how I got, again, all these clips onto this device. So it's almost like the pain I was caused by the Premiere Pro conversion was made up for a little bit by how easy it was to get the files off here. If you have a Mac and an Android phone, you know this is typically a very difficult thing to do because the software is really buggy. It fails all the time. You can also remotely access your desktop, but you wouldn't really want to on a small screen like this. It really is that O+ Connect file management, gallery management, transferring to and from that saved my bacon on multiple occasions. Running with a Snapdragon 8 Elite chipset, the OPPO Find X8 Ultra is a really great performer. It's got 16 gigabytes of RAM, 256, 512, or 1 terabyte of storage. I've got the 512 gigabyte version, and day-to-day super smooth, running any apps on it. Games run really smoothly as well, but it does get hot with heavy use, camera use, or game use. So if you're recording long bouts of 4K 60 Honkai Star Rail Wuthering Waves at maxed out graphic settings, the metal frame becomes a little hand toaster. So do bear that in mind. Typically, though, I found frame rates were solid. What's also good is benchmarks are competitive, and it keeps going for a long time thanks to that huge 6,100 milliamp battery. What that also means is you can expect amongst the best screen on time out there. Interestingly, not as good as the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 7, which has around 17 hours from 80% down to 20% PC Mark benchmark, actually more than 17 hours, which is around on par with the Vivo X200 Ultra, two of the top performers, but it still beats out the Galaxy S25 Ultra and a lot of other phones, including the Red Magic 10 Pro, which has a similar sized battery. So it's very, very good across the board, and it charges quickly too. 48 minutes gets you a full charge plugged in with its 100 watt fast charging, and with 50 watts wireless charging if you've got a OnePlus or OPPO fast charger, you're good to go. You're really, really getting a complete battery experience, no battery anxiety, and you also have a fantastic smartphone built on top of that. So with that, my 3-month review of the Find X8 Ultra draws to a close. And is it the best camera phone of 2025? That's for you to decide, but it's definitely a very, very good smartphone across the board. Yes, the speakers could be better. Yes, it gets hot when gaming, but if you can deal with those caveats, especially at the £850 asking price if you import one, and if you're okay westernizing it from its China ROM, then you'll be getting a really, really good deal. Again, I'll leave a link to Trinity, not sponsored, in the description below, and you can check it out. What is your best camera phone of 2025? Do you like the more natural look OPPO delivers until you zoom in, that is? Or do you prefer a processed out, ready to go look like Vivo, a more contrasty look like Xiaomi that may be a bit more photographic but dials back the dynamic range? I'd be interested to know your thoughts. If you like this video, please do click that thumbs up button. Subscribe to the channel to stay on top of everything that I do. Thank you so much for watching.